Here at jmplumley.com is an article by J.M. Plumley entitled The Big Bad Wood, Nahanni Valley. There were two corpses. They were tied to a tree. Both men had been decapitated. The heads were nowhere to be found. That incident alone was enough to give areas of the Nahanni Valley new names like Dead Men Valley, Headless Creek, Headless Range. But the McLeods were only two in a string of uncanny deaths and disappearances, and not a few numbers of more beheadings. In fact, the laundry list of similar events is so long as to be almost comical, especially when you keep in mind how few people actually visit. These include the incident with Swiss prospector Martin Jorgenson, who followed the McLeods in search of gold, as would many prospectors after him. None ever found it. In 1917, his cabin was found burned to the ground, his body lying nearby, headless. In 1926, a woman named Anne Laferte disappeared from her hunting party overnight. Another hunter started awake at a weird splashing in the river. He looked out of his tent to see a woman that matched Laferte's description. She was completely naked, scrambling up the hillside on all fours. Rocks skittered down and splashed into the river as she went. When she turned her face toward him, he shrunk back. Her expression was horribly wrong, like a woman possessed. The hunter returned to his tent to wait out the night in a cold sweat, and Laferte was never found. 3 years later, in 1929, another gold prospector, Angus Hall, vanished without a trace. 2 years after that, in 1931, prospector Phil Power's cabin was also found burned to the ground, with such unnatural thoroughness that there was little of Powers himself left. Thank you, Kanga Kong, for the super chat. Kanga Kong says, "Love you, Bill, and subs. You never run out of great topics. It's all because of you guys. I do it for you." Thank you, Kanga. In 1936, two more men, Mulholland and Epler, disappeared into that wood. 4 years after that, in 1940, a man named Holmberg was found dead. In 1945, yet another miner, this one from Ontario, was found dead in his sleeping bag, also headless. Around the same time, an experienced trapper named John O'Brien suddenly went missing. After a search, he was finally found next to a campfire, frozen to death, matches still in his hand. It looked to those who found him as if he had been flash frozen in place. In 1949, a man named Skobach was found in his cabin. His diary showed that after 43 days without food, he wrote "Dead Man Here" on a piece of wood, nailed it to his cabin door, and went inside. At some point in 1962, a man committed suicide by setting off dynamite strapped around his waist. Also in the same year, an aircraft pilot miraculously survived a crash into the valley. He set up camp a short distance from where the plane went down. According to his diary, he was well provisioned and confident that it would only be a matter of time before he was rescued. But though he was only 6 miles from his destination, and planes constantly flew overhead in search of him, he was never found. After 50 days, his diary entries end abruptly. His body was never recovered. By 1969, there were 44 recorded disappearances. In 2005, two experienced bushmen, David Horsey and Frederick Hardesty, vanished from their cabin. They were found a month later in places the search party had already combed through, multiple times over. David in thick brush, with unexplained burns on his arms, and Fred floating in the river. Their families were dissatisfied with how the investigation into their deaths went, and have been left deeply unnerved and without closure. According to David's stepbrother, quote, "There were bullet shots all over the place, and there was a gunshot in the floor. The picture is bigger than just two guys, one who died of hypothermia and the other who died of drowning. There was something else that happened before all of that came down." End quote. Another woman, this one named May Lafferty, disappeared from another hunting party with her in-laws. Search parties found articles of clothing left one by one as she walked off into the woods. Her trail disappeared in impossible places, along cliff edges, or on the banks of a stream rushing too fast for one to cross, only to reappear further on. Like all the others, Lafferty was never found. Like some of the others. And Mr. Plumley continues, "I discovered that there were even weirder parts of the Nahanni Valley. Besides being a hunt spot for uncanny death, the valley is also a hot spot for sightings of strange lights, aerial phenomena, and UFOs. Obviously, this means that quite a few people blame the disappearances on aliens or vengeful Neha spirits. Some also suggest that the valley might be a place where the veil is thin, or even that it could be an entrance to the hollow earth. But these are not the only possibilities. In addition to the Dene, mentioning white walkers and spirits shrieking in the dead of night, they also told stories of fearsome hairy giants who used to live in the caves of the canyon walls. These massive dudes were led by a pale chiefess." A chiefess? "And would kill and eat anyone who set foot in their territory. The hairy men might also just be Bigfoot, who has been reported multiple times in the valley. Or maybe people are confusing them with a long-thought extinct bear-dog creature called the Wahila, which has also been sighted there. There are also rumors of mammoths and mastodons. The Nahanni Valley is crawling with cryptids. This might be because, in addition to everything else it has going on, the valley is a bit of a geographical oddity. Along the path of the river are multiple hot springs, which create warmth and allow things like cherries and roses to grow, even in subarctic winter. This mini oasis could support the life of any number of mammals. It also beckons to cold, helpless, stupidly curious humans, calling them to walk into swirling sulfur-scented mist. In sum, there's a lot going on in the Nahanni Valley, more even than I have room to cover in this already long post. It's not just me and the 3 million people who have watched videos on this topic who are interested in the Nahanni Valley. There's a documentary in the works, and plenty of $8,000 trips you can take to check it out for yourself. So will you? How healthy is your respect for the limitations of human survivability? Depending on your plans, I may have a steel turtleneck to sell,